Now, coping with the death of a parent is horrific for anyone, but that's what happened to Matt Philipps from Dunstable when he was just 10 years old. He was orphaned. His mother and stepfather had contracted HIV in the 1980s from contaminated blood products. They'd been brought in from America and used by the NHS. We now know that thousands of others were infected in the same way. Now, an inquiry is underway into whether what happened was covered up. Tonight, Matt has shared his story with us.
There was always a piano in the house. It was quite a beat-up old thing, but it was in tune and it was always there. And my mum was very passionate about music. She sent me off to piano lessons when I was about 7 and continued to this day. He was a haemophiliac. He required treatment, and from that he was infected by the contaminated blood that had been imported from the USA, and she then in turn was infected through him. We've lost one of the kindest people that any of us met, somebody who was warm, intelligent, fun, a maverick, a thinker. I'm sure she felt what you would expect, which was immense sorrow and anger that this had happened to her, that she knew she wasn't going to be able to see her children grow up. When my mum died, I had just moved school that year. The school I moved to was very supportive. They gave me the space that I needed. The friends that I had, they did understand. I think they showed a lot of maturity and empathy, given that they were 10-year-olds like myself. I did get a card at the time from my old classmates expressing their condolences, which I very much appreciated and have still got. People have lost parents, people have lost their children, people have lost siblings, uncles, grandparents, and all because people at the upper echelons of power didn't listen to warnings that were given, and it's difficult for me to really comprehend the callousness of that attitude. Obviously, my mother never got to meet her grandchildren, who would have given her immense amounts of joy and pleasure. So I'm sure she would have spoiled them. I know she would have given them immense amounts of love and nurture, and would have wanted to spend tons of quality time with them.
Well, the clotting factor given to Matt's stepfather was made from blood donated, as he heard, in the USA because the UK didn't have enough. Now, that blood was unscreened, and as donors were paid, it largely came from prison inmates, prostitutes, the homeless, who were desperate for the cash. But they were also more prone to viruses. So was our government negligent in allowing it to be used? I asked Des Collins today. He's a Hertfordshire lawyer representing 800 victims and families, including Matt Philipps.
It was negligent right at the outset. It was possibly careless at the outset. It may have been inadvertent at the outset, but very close to the outset, it became fully apparent that the Department of Health had got this badly wrong. Instead of saying at that point, yes, we've got this badly wrong, we're going to regroup, we're going to do it, we're going to sort this out now, it was easier to tell one lie and then tell another lie and then tell another lie, and we had that process going on for 40 years.
In terms of compensation, what are you asking for?
In terms of compensation, we haven't even looked at that yet because it is so far down the line. I mean, the whole point of compensation is to allow people to rebuild their lives. Now, if you've lost 40 or 50 years of your life in pain and suffering and watched your siblings die and your children die sometimes, how can I value that? How can any court value that? It has to be done, but it's going to be a long way down the line.
But do you think, though, that that is not the government's problem, perhaps, is that if even the victims themselves and their legal team can't put a value on what they deserve to be given, how can the government do that?
No, I think the government's well able to do that because the government is not emotionally involved in the process of evaluation. Back in the 1980s and early 1990s, the government was quite able to sit there behind closed doors and effectively say to itself, these people are going to die fairly quickly, so if we give them £20,000, they'll probably be dead. Let them go and spend it because they won't live that long. So the government is quite capable of doing that.
And you truly believe the decisions made were that callous? It was all about the public purse, let's see what little we can get away with. That is your view?
It's my view, and that view is supported by the documentation which has come to light over the past 18 months. Yes, there are minutes of meetings where those discussions were entered into and those conclusions were reached.
What do you want the outcome to be?
The outcome of the inquiry must be that there is a full explanation for what happened, why it happened, and a certainty as far as we can that it won't happen again. A lot of my clients have said to me that this is a debt which they owe to the last generation and an obligation which they owe to the next. And I think I can't put it any better than that. They feel that the people who have died over the last 40 years, they owe it to them to carry on fighting, and for their children, they owe it to them to carry on fighting and make sure it can't happen again.
Des Collins there. Well, we put his comments to the Department of Health this afternoon, but they said they weren't able to comment while this inquiry is happening.